She was the only daughter of a millionaire. At just 7 years old, she was torn from her home and abandoned on the streets by someone who was supposed to protect her. Her stepmother said it was a special exchange program. But in truth, it was a calculated plan to eliminate the girl from her inheritance and secure the future of the son she carried in her womb. She lived for 5 weeks, begging, hungry and afraid, just a few miles from the mansion where her father believed she was safe. It wasn't doctors or social workers who saved her. It was her own father, returning from a business trip, who found her by chance playing barefoot with street children near a garbage dump. What he discovered upon investigating the truth left him completely shattered. He realized that he had built an empire, but failed at the one thing that truly mattered: protecting the person he loved most. This is the true story of how greed, when disguised as love, can destroy an entire family, and how a father, by confronting his own negligence, learned that success without presence is just an empty illusion. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love to know. Ricardo Valente was returning from New York on his private jet, exhausted but triumphant. He had just closed the biggest merger of his career, a $2.3 billion deal that had taken 3 intense weeks of endless meetings. His mind was still spinning with numbers, contracts, and market strategies as the private plane cut through the sky toward Brazil. He had barely slept in the last 72 hours, but the adrenaline of success kept his eyes open and bright. Now, finally, he could rest and see Helena, his 7-year-old daughter, who, according to Daniela, was loving her cultural exchange program at a Swiss school. The imported car glided through the streets of São Paulo as Ricardo checked emails on his phone. The driver suggested an alternate route to avoid the chaotic Friday afternoon traffic, cutting through outlying neighborhoods Ricardo had never visited. He barely paid attention to the drastically changing landscape, corporate skyscrapers giving way to precarious buildings and potholed streets. His mind was focused on responding to congratulatory messages from investors and partners eager to discuss the next steps. But then, something in his peripheral vision caught his attention and made his heart skip a beat. Near a makeshift garbage dump, a group of children was playing barefoot among scraps of cardboard and torn trash bags. The scene was desolate. Small, dirty bodies, torn clothes, faces marked by the harshness of a reality far too brutal for their age. Ricardo felt a momentary pang in his chest, that vague guilt that wealthy people feel when confronted with misery. But he was about to look away when a specific movement froze his blood. One of the girls, her back to him, was running her fingers through her hair in a peculiar way, 3 times in a row behind her left ear. It was a nervous tic Ricardo knew intimately because Helena had inherited that exact gesture from her deceased mother, Clara. "Stop the car!" Ricardo's voice came out as a hoarse shout that startled the driver. The vehicle braked abruptly, its tires screeching on the uneven asphalt. Ricardo didn't wait for the car to come to a complete stop. He threw open the door and jumped out, stumbling slightly, his heart hammering so hard it felt like it would explode from his chest. His Italian leather shoes sank into the mud as he ran toward the group of children. They were frightened by the man in the impeccable suit running toward them, and some began to back away. But the girl who was touching her hair turned around slowly, and when her eyes met Ricardo's, the entire world stopped spinning. It was Helena, his Helena. Her face was smudged with dirt, her once well-kept hair was now tangled and lifeless, and her bare feet were covered in sores and calluses. But it was those brown eyes, identical to Clara's, that pierced Ricardo's soul like sharp knives. For an eternal second, father and daughter just stared at each other, she in silent shock, he in growing horror. Then Helena began to tremble, her lips moving without a sound, tears instantly welling up and tracing clean lines down her dirty cheeks. And finally, like a cry torn from the depths of weeks of abandonment and terror, she sobbed, "Daddy?" Ricardo fell to his knees in the mud, unable to process what he was seeing. What is all the money in the world worth if you can't protect the one you love most? The question echoed in his mind as Helena ran into his arms, a weight so light it broke his heart. She was thinner, much thinner than she had been 3 weeks ago when he left for New York. Her small arms wrapped around his neck with desperate strength, and she cried uncontrollably against his shoulder, soaking his designer suit with tears and dirt. Ricardo couldn't form words. He just held his daughter tightly, as if she might disappear again if he loosened his grip. The other children in the group watched the scene with wide eyes, not fully understanding what was happening. The driver had gotten out of the car and stood at a respectful distance, equally shocked. Ricardo finally managed to pull Helena back enough to look at her face, his hands trembling as he brushed strands of dirty hair from her forehead. "What happened? How are you here? Where is Daniela?" The questions tumbled out, but Helena just shook her head, unable to speak through her sobs. The contrast was brutal, the gleaming imported car just a few feet away, the man in a $1,000 suit, and the barefoot child covered in filth and trauma. He had built an empire. Valente Holdings had 47 companies in its portfolio, offices in 12 countries, and over 8,000 employees. Ricardo Valente was a magazine cover star, a speaker at international conferences, a consultant to CEOs and politicians. But at that moment, kneeling in the mud of a neighborhood he didn't even know existed, holding his 7-year-old daughter who was supposed to be in a Swiss school but was living by a garbage dump, Ricardo Valente was just a broken man. All the strategic meetings, all the million-dollar contracts, all the praise and awards, none of it meant anything at all. He had failed. He had failed so completely and devastatingly that no amount of money in the world could undo it. Helena finally managed to form words between her sobs. "Mommy, Daniela said it was an exchange program, that you had approved it. She left me here and never came back." Every word was a stab to Ricardo's chest. His mind began to process the magnitude of the betrayal, but he still couldn't put all the pieces together. How was this possible? How had he not noticed? The short video calls, the vague text messages, the quick audio clips Daniela sent from Helena at the exchange. It all made sense now in a horrible, cruel way. Daniela had lied. Daniela had abandoned his daughter. And he, too obsessed with business and power, had been an accomplice by not checking, not insisting, not questioning her blind trust. Ricardo stood up with Helena in his arms, she still clinging to him tightly. He looked at the other children, 4 boys and girls between 6 and 10 years old, all as abandoned as Helena had been. "Did you take care of her?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. An older girl, about 9, nodded shyly. "She taught us how to read, with paper from the trash. She's very smart." The words should have filled Ricardo with pride, but they only brought more guilt. While he was closing multi-million-dollar mergers in air-conditioned rooms with views of Manhattan, his daughter was teaching street children to read using garbage as school supplies. "Thank you for protecting her," was all he could manage to say before carrying Helena back to the car. She wouldn't let go of him, and he had no intention of ever letting her go again. Now, as the driver started the car and Ricardo held Helena against his chest, a single truth burned in his mind. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what truly has value. And he had almost lost everything. 6 weeks before that devastating encounter at the dump, Ricardo Valente's life was the corporate definition of success. Every morning began at 5:30 a.m. with a personal training session in his private gym inside the 2,000 square meter mansion in a high-end gated community. Breakfast was prepared by a private chef while he reviewed financial reports and international news in 3 languages. Meetings started at 7 a.m. and stretched late into the night. Board meetings, expansion strategy, acquisition analysis. Ricardo had built Valente Holdings on his own, starting with a small consulting firm 18 years ago and transforming it into the largest investment conglomerate in Latin America. But all that success came at a hidden cost he refused to calculate. Clara, his late wife, had died 3 years ago in a car accident while returning from a parent-teacher meeting at Helena's school. Ricardo never completely forgave himself, though he rationally knew he had no control over a drunk driver running a red light. Clara was a literature teacher, passionate about books and teaching. She perfectly balanced Ricardo's frantic corporate life with Helena's careful upbringing. When Clara died, Ricardo dove even deeper into his work. It was his way of escaping the gut-wrenching pain. Helena, 4 years old at the time, became the shared responsibility of housekeepers, nannies, and the loyal Paula, who had worked for the family since before Helena was born. But Paula was more than an employee. She was a confidant, a second mother, and she kept Clara's memory alive through stories and rituals. A year ago, Ricardo met Daniela Carvalho at a corporate fundraising event. She was 32, 10 years his junior, had a degree in public relations, and worked for a boutique agency that catered to high-net-worth individuals. Daniela was beautiful, articulate, and knew exactly what to say and when to smile. She showed genuine interest in Ricardo's business, asked intelligent questions about market strategies, and most importantly, she seemed to adore Helena. In the first few months of dating, Daniela brought gifts for the girl, watched children's movies with her, and hugged and kissed her with seemingly authentic affection. Ricardo saw in her the possibility of rebuilding a family, of giving Helena a mother figure again. 8 months after their first date, they were married in an intimate ceremony in the Maldives. The first 2 months were reasonably harmonious, though Paula noticed subtle changes. Daniela began to suggest that Helena spend more time in extracurricular activities: ballet, swimming, English, Mandarin lessons. She needs to be competitive in the future, Daniela argued. Ricardo, always focused on results, agreed. Helena's schedule became as packed as an executive's. Family meals, once sacred on Sundays, a tradition Clara had started, became rare. There was always something more urgent, a last-minute trip, a corporate dinner. But the breaking point came when Daniela, claiming Paula was old-fashioned and too permissive, convinced Ricardo to fire her. Paula cried as she said goodbye to Helena, and the girl was inconsolable for days. But Ricardo was so immersed in negotiations to acquire a tech company that he barely noticed the real impact. The inciting event came in the form of an irresistible opportunity. RG Capital, an American private equity giant, offered a merger proposal that would transform Valente Holdings into a top-tier global player. But there was a condition. Ricardo had to go to New York in person and lead the face-to-face negotiations for at least 3 weeks, possibly longer. It was the chance of a lifetime, the definitive consolidation of his legacy, resources for international expansion, validation in the North American market. But it meant being away from Helena for the first time for such an extended period. Ricardo hesitated for approximately 40 seconds before accepting. Daniela was extremely supportive. "Go for it, my love. I'll take care of everything here. Helena will be fine." 2 days before Ricardo was to leave for New York, Daniela had a wonderful idea. "Love, I found an incredible cultural exchange program for gifted children in Switzerland. It's 6 weeks, with full immersion in German and French, outdoor activities, elite Montessori education. It would be perfect for Helena. And that way you don't have to worry. She'll be in a structured, safe environment, learning from the best. What do you think?" Ricardo quickly reviewed the website Daniela showed him on her tablet. It looked legitimate, with beautiful photos of happy children in alpine landscapes and enthusiastic parent testimonials. He didn't check references, didn't call the school, didn't verify its accreditation. His mind was completely consumed by financial spreadsheets and merger terms. "If you think it's good for her, I trust you," was his response as he signed approval documents Daniela placed in front of him. He didn't even read them completely. Helena didn't want to go. The night before Ricardo's departure, she hugged her father with unusual force and whispered, "Can't I go with you, Daddy? I promised to be quiet in the hotel." Ricardo felt a pang in his chest but dismissed it with cold rationality. "Honey, Daddy is going to be working the whole time. You'll have much more fun on the exchange program. You'll make friends, learn languages, see beautiful places. And when I get back, you can tell me all about it, okay?" Helena nodded with tears in her eyes, but didn't argue further. Daniela watched the scene from the bedroom doorway with an expression Ricardo interpreted as maternal empathy, but which was actually calculated satisfaction. At the airport, Ricardo said a hasty goodbye, already mentally in executive mode. Helena hugged him for long seconds, but he was distracted by notifications on his phone. "Daddy loves you, princess. Be a good girl on your exchange." Those were the last words he said before boarding. What Ricardo didn't know was that Daniela was 2 months pregnant, not with his child, but with Marcelo Augustos, a 45-year-old bankrupt businessman she had known before Ricardo, and with whom she maintained a parallel relationship. Marcelo was broke after mismanaging his businesses and desperately needed money. When Daniela discovered the pregnancy, she and Marcelo concocted a plan: eliminate Helena from the line of inheritance, ensure that Daniela's son would be the sole heir to the Valente fortune, gradually divert resources, and eventually disappear together. Helena was an obstacle. The girl was officially Ricardo's sole heir. His will left 70% to her, 30% to charities. If something happened to Helena, Daniela, as his wife, would control everything. And if she had a son with Ricardo, or one he thought was his, that son would inherit everything. The plan was cruel, but simple. Make Helena disappear in a way that looked like an accident or an unsolved kidnapping, wait an appropriate amount of time, console a devastated Ricardo, announce the pregnancy as a light at the end of the tunnel, and consolidate control over the estate. But Daniela underestimated 2 things: the survival skills of a 7-year-old child and the sheer chance that would lead Ricardo to drive past that exact garbage dump 6 weeks later. For now, as Ricardo boarded his flight to New York, with his mind focused on mergers and markets, and Helena slept innocently, unaware that her life was about to turn into a nightmare, Daniela was reviewing the plan with Marcelo via encrypted messages. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, Helena Valente would cease to be a millionaire's daughter and would become just another child lost on the streets of São Paulo. And no one, Daniela was certain, would ever find her. Rodrigo Santana, a minority partner and Ricardo's best friend since college, never liked Daniela. He thought the marriage was too rushed, the woman too opportunistic, the timing too convenient. But Ricardo was so obsessed with the idea of a reconstituted family that he wouldn't listen to any reservations. "You're paranoid, Rodrigo. Not every woman is after money. Daniela loves me, and she loves Helena." Rodrigo learned to silence his concerns but kept a discreet watch. He noticed when Paula was abruptly fired. He noticed when Helena started to seem sadder the few times he saw her. He noticed when Daniela began to completely control Ricardo's social and family calendar. But without concrete proof, Rodrigo could do nothing but wait and hope he was wrong. Unfortunately, he was absolutely right. And in a few weeks, he would be a key player in unmasking Daniela's plan and helping Ricardo confront the most devastating betrayal of his life. The morning after Ricardo left for New York, Daniela woke Helena at 5:30 a.m., much earlier than her usual time. The girl rubbed her eyes in confusion, still drowsy, as Daniela flicked on the bedroom light. "Get up, Helena. Today is the day of your exchange program. You need to be ready in 20 minutes. Daniela's voice was cold, devoid of the affected warmth she used when Ricardo was present. Helena sat up in bed, disoriented. "But Daddy said it was next week." Daniela cut her off. "Change of plans. The school called. They have an immediate opening. It's now or never. Your father has already approved everything." It was a lie, but Helena, at 7 years old and raised to obey adults, had no way of questioning it. Helena quickly dressed in the clothes Daniela threw on the bed, a simple outfit the girl didn't even recognize as her own. None of the designer clothes she usually wore, none of the comfortable imported shoes. Daniela didn't allow her to pack a suitcase. "They have everything you need there. New clothes, school supplies, everything is provided by the school." Helena wanted to at least take the teddy bear her mother Clara had given her before she died, but Daniela snatched it from her hands. "Big girls don't need childish toys. You're turning 8. You need to mature." The words cut Helena, but she swallowed her tears. Daniela pushed her down the stairs and into the garage, where an ordinary car, not the family's luxury SUV, was already waiting with the engine running. The driver was no one Helena knew. He was a rough-looking man, a friend of Marcelo's, recruited specifically for this task, for a generous payment and guaranteed silence. Helena got into the back seat, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and an anxiety she couldn't name. "Can I call Daddy before I go?" she asked timidly. Daniela, sitting in the front seat, replied without turning around. "Your father is in an important meeting. You can talk to him when you get there. Now be quiet." Her tone was so harsh that Helena shrank back in her seat and decided to remain silent. The car left the luxury condominium at 6:10 a.m., and Helena watched through the rear window as the golden gates of the only home she had ever known disappeared from view. The journey lasted almost 2 hours, but not toward an airport as Helena expected. The car drove into increasingly poor areas of the city. Potholed streets, precarious houses, businesses with rusty signs. Helena began to feel genuinely frightened. "Aunt Daniela, where is the airport? Aren't we going the wrong way?" Daniela finally turned around, and the mask of maternal affection had completely fallen away. Her eyes were cold, her face that of someone performing an unpleasant but necessary task. "Change of plans, Helena. You're not going to Switzerland, you're going to stay here for a while." Helena's heart raced. "But, Daddy, does he know?" Daniela smiled coldly. "Your father knows exactly what he needs to know. Now get out of the car." They had stopped in front of an abandoned building in an outlying area Helena had never seen before. There was no one on the street at 8:01 on a rainy Friday morning. The driver opened the back door and practically dragged Helena out. She began to cry. "I want my daddy. You can't leave me here, please." Daniela got out of the car, approached, and gripped Helena's shoulders with a painful tightness. "Listen to me, you spoiled little girl. Your father doesn't want you anymore. He asked me to bring you here because you're a burden, a problem. He wants to start a new, real family. You were a mistake, the daughter of some nobody teacher who was never good enough. Now forget you were ever rich. This is your life now." Each word was a deliberate stab into a child's heart. Helena was sobbing uncontrollably, unable to process what was happening. Daniela got back into the car without a backward glance. "Wait, please. I promise I'll be good. I won't be any trouble. Please don't leave me here." Helena ran after the car, but it accelerated quickly, splashing mud onto her clothes and face. In seconds, the vehicle disappeared, and Helena was left alone on an unknown street, in a dangerous neighborhood, with no money, no phone, nothing but the clothes on her back. She stood there for long minutes, trembling, waiting for someone to come back. Surely it was a mistake. Surely her daddy didn't know. Surely someone would come for her. But no one came. The rain began to fall harder, soaking Helena to the bone. She walked to the abandoned building to seek shelter and found a relatively dry corner where she huddled, hugging her knees. She stayed there for hours, crying until she had no tears left, waiting for her father to miraculously appear. But Ricardo was 7,800 kilometers away, in an air-conditioned meeting room on the 47th floor of a corporate building in Manhattan, reviewing contractual clauses and discussing profit projections. His phone rang twice. Calls from an unknown number that he ignored focused on the presentation by RG Capital's CFO. They were desperate attempts from Helena calling from a public payphone, but the number wasn't saved, and Ricardo was too busy to answer calls from strangers. As night fell, Helena realized with growing horror that no one was coming. She tried to ask for help from a few people passing by, a middle-aged man who shooed her away rudely, a woman who quickened her pace thinking it was a scam, a couple who said, "Find the police, girl," without stopping. Helena tried to find a police station but didn't know where it was. She tried to remember her home address to tell someone, but she could only recall fragments. Gated community, with a golden gate. House number. Her 7-year-old mind didn't retain information that had always been irrelevant because adults were always in control. Hunger began to grip her violently. She hadn't eaten since the previous night. She found leftover bread in a dumpster near a closed bakery and ate it despite her disgust, crying with every bite. The first 3 days were the worst. Helena wandered aimlessly, sleeping under awnings, begging for food at restaurant doors and being shooed away from most, and drinking water from public fountains. She tried to approach police officers twice, but they didn't believe the story of a dirty girl claiming to be a millionaire's daughter. They thought she was a street kid, making up a story to get attention. Go home, girl. Stop making up lies. One of them even gave her a light shove, annoyed by her fantasy. Helena gave up on asking authorities for help. On the 4th day, exhausted and feverish, she collapsed near a garbage dump on the outskirts of the city. She was found by a group of 4 street children, Joanna, 9, Miguel, 8, Pedro, 7, and Ana, 6, who took her to their hideout, a space between abandoned shipping containers. Meanwhile, in New York, Ricardo was sending voice messages to Daniela. "Love, how is Helena doing on the exchange? Did you get to talk to her today?" Daniela replied with carefully planned text messages. "Hi, love. Just spoke with the coordinator. Helena is loving it. She made friends with girls from Germany and Japan. She's even trying to speak German, so cute. She's so busy with activities she hasn't even asked to talk to you yet, but I'll send her your love. Focus on your meetings, everything is under control here." Ricardo would smile, relieved, and go back to his contracts. Daniela even sent short audio clips imitating Helena's voice, recorded earlier and edited, saying generic things like, "Hi, Daddy, everything's fine, I love you." Ricardo would listen between meetings and feel his heart warm. He didn't know that his daughter, at that very moment, was sleeping on dirty cardboard, hungry, feverish, and terrified, just 15 kilometers from home. The following weeks established a cruel routine of parallel worlds. In New York, Ricardo delved deeper and deeper into complex negotiations, financial due diligence, governance alignment, corporate restructuring, team integration. He worked 18 hours a day, fueled by coffee and corporate adrenaline. He slept little, dreamed of spreadsheets, and woke up reviewing contracts. The deal was proving to be more intricate than expected, requiring extensions. Just one more week, he kept telling himself. Rodrigo, managing operations in Brazil, noticed that Ricardo seemed more distant than usual, even for his workaholic standards. "Are you okay, man? Have you talked to Helena?" he asked during a video conference. "Everything's great. She's loving Switzerland. Daniela sends daily updates," Ricardo would reply automatically, not realizing he had never spoken directly with his daughter. Meanwhile, in São Paulo, Helena was learning to survive in a world she had never been prepared for. The group of children who took her in were street veterans, orphans, runaways, escapees from abusive homes. Joanna, the eldest at 9, became their makeshift leader and survival teacher. Never take food from a drunk-looking adult. Never sleep alone. Always stay close to us. Don't cry near grown-ups because they get angry or do bad things. Helena absorbed each lesson like a manual for an alien world. She was constantly afraid, cried every night in hiding, and hunger was a physical pain that never completely left her. But there was something in her, perhaps an inheritance from Clara, that refused to give up. On her 10th day on the street, Helena found a box of discarded children's books near the dump. They were old, with torn and stained pages, but they were books. She remembered the stories her mother used to tell her before bed, the afternoons when Clara taught her to read, pointing to each word with infinite patience. Helena carefully gathered the books and took them to the hideout. Joanna looked on with curiosity. "You know how to read?" Helena nodded shyly. "My mum taught me." Before she left, Joanna was silent for a moment and then asked, "Can you teach us?" That was how Helena found purpose in the midst of chaos. Every afternoon, after scrounging for food in the trash or begging for coins at intersections, the 5 children would gather, and Helena would teach them letters, words, and sentences. B-A-L-L, ball. Now you write it in the dirt with a stick. She was a teacher at 7, just as her mother had been. It was during one of these improvised classes that a moment occurred that Helena would never forget. She was sorting through old papers from the dump to use as writing material when she found a torn but still recognizable photograph. It was her mother, Clara, smiling in a photo that used to be in the mansion's living room. Helena froze, her hands trembling as she held the piece of paper. How did that photo end up here? The obvious answer was devastating. Daniela had gotten rid of all of Clara's memories. She had thrown away photos, personal belongings, keepsakes, everything into the trash, which had ended up exactly where Helena was. It was as if the universe was cruelly showing her that both she and her mother were disposable. Helena hugged the photo to her chest and cried silently, but she kept it carefully in the pocket of her tattered pants. It was the only thing she had left of her former life. In the 3rd week, Helena's situation became dangerous. A man of about 50 began watching the group of children with disturbing attention. He approached them, offering food, money, and shelter. "Come with me, I have a warm house, good food. You don't have to live like this." Joanna, experienced, recognized the danger immediately. "We're not going, thanks." But the man persisted, focusing especially on Helena and Anna, the youngest. "Just you two then. The older ones can stay. I'll take good care of you." His tone was grotesque, and Helena instinctively felt there was malice in it. Joanna stood in front of them. "I said no! Get out of here, you disgusting old man!" The man lunged forward, trying to grab Helena's arm, but Miguel threw a rock that hit him in the temple. The entire group ran, and the man didn't pursue them. But the incident left Helena traumatized. She had almost gotten into that car, almost accepted because she was so desperate for a protective adult. While Helena was facing an attempted kidnapping, Ricardo was at a corporate dinner at the Modern, the restaurant at Momar in Manhattan, celebrating a breakthrough in the negotiations. He toasted with $1,000-a-bottle champagne and accepted praise from RG Capital executives. "You're a brilliant negotiator, Ricardo. This deal will make history." Ricardo smiled, savored his lobster, and discussed quarterly projections. His phone buzzed. A message from Daniela. "Love, the school sent a picture of Helena. Look how beautiful." Attached was a generic photo of a blonde child from behind in an alpine landscape. Definitely not Helena, dark hair, olive skin, but it was blurry enough to deceive a hurried glance. Ricardo quickly zoomed in, thought he recognized something, and replied, "Beautiful, miss her." We're finalizing the governance clause tomorrow, maybe 4 more days, and I'll be back. He didn't realize the photo was a stock image from the internet. By the 4th week, Helena's body began to show serious signs of deprivation. She was visibly thinner, with deep, dark circles under her eyes and brittle hair. She developed a persistent cough that Miguel recognized as the beginning of pneumonia. He had had it and almost died. "You need medicine, Helena. Medicine from a pharmacy." But medicine cost money they didn't have. Joanna made a difficult decision. "We'll have to beg for more money. Helena will stay here and rest. We'll go to the intersections." Helena felt terrible seeing the other children work while she rested, but she didn't have the strength to stand for long. A fever made everything hazy. She would hallucinate while awake, talking to her mother Clara, asking her father to come get her. "Daddy, please, I know you didn't send me away. I know she lied. Come get me, Daddy, please." At this critical moment, Rodrigo began to suspect that something was wrong. He had asked Ricardo for the contact information of the Swiss school to send Helena a gift. It was almost her birthday. But Ricardo said Daniela would handle it. Rodrigo insisted, saying he wanted to send a surprise directly. Ricardo, pressed in the middle of a meeting, asked Daniela for the contact. Daniela sent the name of a school that Rodrigo discovered, after a 10-minute search, did not exist. The website was a fake, created specifically to deceive. Rodrigo felt a chill. He didn't confront Ricardo immediately. He knew his friend was under immense pressure, and an accusation without proof would be dismissed. But he began a discreet investigation. He called contacts, checked movements, looked up records, and he discovered something disturbing. There was no record of Helena Valente leaving the country in the last 4 weeks. None at all. By the 5th week, Helena was at her physical and emotional limit. The fever had broken thanks to medicine Joanna managed to buy with 3 days' worth of collective begging, but the malnutrition, trauma, and constant exposure were taking a heavy toll. She began to believe, in part, Daniela's cruel words. "Maybe Daddy really doesn't want me anymore. Maybe I am a burden. Maybe..." But then she would hold the torn photo of her mother and hear Clara's voice in her memory. "Helena, my love, you are the most precious thing in the world. Your father loves you more than anything, never doubt that." Helena swung between despair and hope, between giving up and resisting. Meanwhile, less than 15 kilometers away, Daniela was dining at a 5-star restaurant with Marcelo, planning their next steps and laughing at how perfectly the plan was working. Ricardo finally closed the merger on the last day of the 5th week. The deal was signed, champagne was drunk, handshakes were exchanged, and photos were taken for the corporate press. He was exhausted but euphoric. It was the pinnacle of his career. He sent a message to Daniela. "It's done. Coming back tomorrow. Can't wait to see you and Helena. I'll go pick her up from Switzerland myself next week." Daniela read the message and felt a quiet panic. She hadn't expected Ricardo to want to go to the school. She needed a new plan, a new lie. But before she could reply, Ricardo was already on his private jet back to Brazil. He would land in São Paulo on Friday afternoon, and fate, both cruel and merciful, would have his driver suggest a shortcut that passed by the exact garbage dump where Helena was teaching children to read with old papers and stubborn hope. The encounter that would change everything was hours away. Ricardo's private jet landed at Congonhas Airport at 2:35 p.m. On Friday, under a cloudy sky that threatened rain. He was tired but satisfied, already mentally calculating the next steps for the international expansion the merger made possible. His driver was waiting for him with the imported SUV, door open, posture impeccable. "Welcome back, Mr. Valente. Straight home?" Ricardo hesitated, checking his phone. Daniela hadn't replied to his last message about picking up Helena in Switzerland. Strange, but she was probably busy. "Yes, home. I want to see my wife, and tomorrow I'll prepare a surprise to go get Helena." The driver nodded and took the usual route. But Friday afternoon traffic in Sao Paulo is chaotic, and after 20 minutes at a standstill on the marginal, the driver suggested, "Sir, if we cut through Cidade Tiradentes, we can avoid this traffic jam. It'll be half an hour quicker." Ricardo agreed distractedly, answering emails on his tablet. The car veered off the main route and entered neighborhoods Ricardo had never set foot in. The urban landscape changed dramatically. Corporate skyscrapers gave way to favelas. Smooth asphalt turned into potholed streets. Security gave way to visible tension. Ricardo barely paid attention, focused on reviewing a presentation for the board meeting on Monday. But then, as the car slowly passed a particularly dilapidated street due to a huge pothole, something in his peripheral vision made him look up. A group of children was playing near a mountain of trash. It wasn't the poverty itself that caught his attention. He'd seen that on the news and in corporate social responsibility reports. It was a specific movement. One of the girls, her back to the street, ran her fingers behind her left ear 3 consecutive times. Ricardo's heart literally skipped a beat. That gesture. He knew that gesture with painful intimacy. Clara used to do it when she was nervous or concentrating. 3 strokes of her fingers behind her left ear, an unconscious and distinctive movement. Helena had inherited the exact tick, and Ricardo used to joke with her about it. "You're just like Mommy," even down to the secret gestures. But it couldn't be. Helena was in Switzerland, wasn't she? Ricardo felt a chill run down his spine. "Stop the car," he said quietly. The driver didn't hear him over the engine noise. "Stop the car!" Ricardo shouted with an urgency that startled the driver. The vehicle screeched to a halt, tires screaming, kicking up dust and mud. Ricardo didn't wait for it to stop completely. He flung the door open and practically jumped out, his designer suit and Italian shoes sinking immediately into the mud. He ran. He ran like he hadn't run in years, heart pounding, lungs burning, his mind screaming that he was crazy, but his paternal instinct roaring louder. The children saw him, a man in a suit running towards them, and got scared. Some started to retreat, but the girl who was touching her hair turned around slowly, and when her eyes met Ricardo's, the entire world stopped. It was Helena. There was no possible doubt. Even with her face smudged with dirt, tangled hair, torn clothes, bare feet covered in sores, it was those brown eyes identical to Clara's, that expression, those eyebrows. It was his daughter, his Helena, here, at this dump, barefoot, dirty, thin, traumatized, real. For 3 eternal seconds, father and daughter just stared at each other across a distance of a few meters that felt like miles. Helena began to tremble violently, as if her body was processing the impossibility before her mind could. Her lips moved, forming a word that didn't come out immediately. Tears began to well up instantly, washing clean lines down her dirty cheeks. And then, like a scream torn from the depths of 5 weeks of abandonment, terror, and loneliness, she sobbed loud and clear, "Daddy!" The broken word was like a punch to Ricardo's gut. His legs almost gave out. Helena ran. She ran with a speed born of desperation and need, and Ricardo fell to his knees in the mud, arms open, receiving the small but devastating impact of his daughter colliding with his chest. She was so light, frighteningly light. 5 weeks ago, Helena weighed 24 kilos, typical for a healthy 7-year-old girl. Now she felt like she weighed less than 20. Ricardo could feel prominent bones through her thin clothes as he hugged her with desperate force. Helena was crying uncontrollably, without restraint, clutching his suit with a strength that would leave marks, her face buried in his neck, her entire body shaking with violent sobs. Ricardo was crying too, tears he didn't even know he could produce. Tears that burned his face, tears mixed with devastating horror, guilt and relief all at once. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He tried to ask questions, but his throat was closed. All he could do was hold on Hold on, as if she might evaporate. Hold on, as if he could undo 5 weeks of terror through the sheer force of his embrace. Finally, Ricardo managed to pull Helena back enough to see her face, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he brushed away strands of dirty hair. What? How? Helena, what happened? How are you here? Where is Daniela? The questions tumbled out, desperate. Helena was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, let alone speak. She said, Mommy, Daniela said it was an exchange program. Each word was cut short by a sob. She brought me here, left me, said that you didn't want me anymore, that I was a burden. Helena couldn't go on, breaking down into renewed sobs. Ricardo felt something break inside him, not figuratively but literally, as if some vital organ had shattered. No, 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 Helena, look at me. Look at me. He held her face with gentle firmness. I never said that. I didn't know. I didn't know, honey. I didn't know. The truth began to form, horrible and clear. Daniela had lied. Daniela had abandoned Helena. Daniela had forged messages, photos, audio clips. Daniela had invented a school that didn't exist. And he, Ricardo Valente, brilliant CEO, internationally respected negotiator, the man who built a billion-dollar empire, he had believed her. He believed her because it was convenient to believe, because he allowed work to consume all of his attention, because he outsourced his fatherhood, because he didn't check, didn't question, didn't insist on speaking directly with his daughter. While he was signing contracts and toasting with champagne in Manhattan, his 7-year-old daughter was here, 15 kilometers from home, barefoot, hungry, scared, traumatized. The guilt was as physical as a blow. Ricardo turned to the side and vomited in the mud, his body rejecting the magnitude of his failure. The other children watched the scene with a mixture of confusion and cautious hope. Joanna, the oldest, approached timidly. Sir, are you really her dad? She talked about you every day, said you were going to come get her. The girl's voice broke something else in Ricardo. He looked at Joanna and saw the other 3 children behind her. Miguel, Pedro, Ana, all equally dirty, thin, abandoned. You took care of her? His voice came out hoarse. Joanna nodded. We took care of her. She's our friend. She taught us how to read. Ricardo looked at Helena, who was still clutching him as if he would disappear. You taught them to read? Helena nodded between sobs. With paper from the trash, like Mommy. Like Mommy taught me. Ricardo closed his eyes tightly, a new wave of pain and pride and guilt washing over him. He stood up with Helena still in his arms. She absolutely refused to let go, her legs wrapped around his waist, her arms around his neck. The driver was standing near the car, visibly shocked. Ricardo turned to the other children. His mind was in chaos, but one thing was crystal clear. He couldn't just leave them here. Not after they had saved his daughter. You're coming with me, all of you. Now. Joanna blinked, confused. Sir, Ricardo repeated with a firmness born of absolute decision. I said, you're coming with me. I'll get you food, a bath, clean clothes, and we'll sort this out. You saved my daughter. I don't forget that. Come on, now! His CEO voice, accustomed to giving orders that were not questioned, left no room for argument. The 4 children exchanged glances and hesitantly followed him to the luxury SUV, which to them was literally from another planet. Ricardo didn't go home. He instructed the driver to go straight to the Hospital Israelita Albert Einstein, the best in São Paulo. Helena wouldn't let go of him, and he had no intention of letting her. The other 4 children were in the back seat, their eyes wide at the leather interior, the onboard technology, the mineral water in small glass bottles. Miguel reverently touched the upholstery, unable to believe something could be so soft. During the drive, Ricardo called Rodrigo. Rod, I need you at Einstein now. A real family emergency. And bring lawyers. Christina and Marcelo, the best criminal lawyers we have. Now. His tone made it clear it wasn't a request. It was an order. Rodrigo, who had known Ricardo for 20 years, recognized something in his friend's voice he had never heard before. Controlled fury mixed with something broken. I'm on my way. 10 minutes. Ricardo hung up and called the hospital. Dr. Mendez, it's Ricardo Valente. I need a full pediatric team, a private room, and nutritional, psychological, and physical trauma evaluations. 5 children. Top priority. I'm arriving in 7 minutes. Money buys access, and Ricardo didn't hesitate to use every available resource. At the hospital, Helena was examined first, while the other children were attended to in an adjacent room. Ricardo didn't leave Helena's side for a second. He held her hand as doctors checked her vital signs, drew blood, and asked gentle questions. The results were devastating. Severe malnutrition, chronic dehydration, the onset of anemia, multiple bruises in different stages of healing, infected cuts on her feet, and signs of prolonged exposure to the elements. Dr. Mendez, a pediatrician who had known the family since Helena's birth, had to pause multiple times to compose himself. Ricardo, she's been like this for weeks. Weeks? How? Ricardo just shook his head, unable to verbalize it. The psychological evaluation was worse. Acute abandonment trauma, severe separation anxiety, post-traumatic stress response. Helena wouldn't let go of her father's hand. When a nurse tried to take her for a bath, she went into a full-blown panic. Ricardo had to go with her, holding her hand through the curtain, constantly talking. Daddy's here. I'm not leaving. I'm right here, honey. While Helena was being treated, Rodrigo arrived with Cristina Almeida and Marcelo Torres, criminal lawyers with formidable reputations. Ricardo met them in the hallway, and for the first time in 20 years of friendship, Rodrigo saw Ricardo Valente, the man who commanded boardrooms, with an intimidating presence, completely shattered. She abandoned my daughter at a dump, Rod. Abandoned her, a 7-year-old child, for 5 weeks, while sending me messages saying she was fine. Rodrigo hugged his friend as Ricardo finally broke down, sobbing against his shoulder. After a long minute, Ricardo recomposed himself with visible effort, wiped his face, and turned to the lawyers with red eyes but a firm voice. Daniela did this. I don't know why yet, but I'm going to find out. And when I do, I'm going to destroy her legally. I want a criminal prosecution, child abandonment, attempted murder if it applies. I will use every resource, every contact, every bit of influence I have. She will pay. Christina, a 50-year-old woman with 30 years of experience in high-profile criminal cases, asked direct questions and began to build a strategy. We need solid evidence. Her location on the day of the abandonment, message logs, the forged audio. Did you authorize this exchange program? Ricardo shook his head. She showed me a website. I signed a paper without reading it. I was focused on the merger. My God, I signed it without reading. Christina placed a hand on his shoulder. Ricardo, focus. Guilt later. Now strategy. We'll need a private investigator, access to phone records, location tracking. How much time do we have before she knows you found Helena? Ricardo checked his phone. Daniela had sent 3 messages in the last 2 hours. Love, are you almost here? I've prepared a special dinner. Can't wait to see you. She didn't know. Maybe 2 hours before she suspects something is wrong. Marcelo Torres, an expert in investigation and forensic evidence, started working immediately. I need the phone you used in New York. All of Daniela's messages preserved. I'll request a warrant to access her records, the car's GPS, the condominium security cameras showing her leaving with Helena that morning. Rodrigo interjected, I already started my own investigation a week ago. I found out the school doesn't exist. The website is a fake. I also discovered that Helena never left the country. No immigration records. I have contacts who can fast-track a court order. Christina smiled coldly. Good. We will build an airtight case. Daniela is going down, and she's going down hard. But Ricardo, she looked him directly in the eyes. You need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. The media will cover it. Details will come out, including... She hesitated. Including questions about why you didn't check, why you didn't notice. Ricardo swallowed hard. I know, I failed. I failed as a father. I was negligent. I prioritized work, power, money over my daughter. If I could go back in time... Rodrigo cut him off. Man, you were manipulated. Daniela is a calculating predator. This isn't entirely your fault. But Ricardo shook his head. No, Rod. She manipulated, yes, but I let her. I chose to believe her because it was convenient. I chose not to insist on a video call because I was busy. I chose to sign a paper without reading it because I trusted her blindly. I facilitated every step of the way. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, Ricardo continued in a low but firm voice. I will admit that publicly. I will take my share of the blame. But Daniela will pay for hers, completely. Christina nodded in approval. Humility and accountability will play in our favor in the court of public opinion, and in the actual court as well. We'll do this right. 2 hours later, with Helena stabilized, fed with controlled nutrition, medicated, and finally asleep, still holding her father's hand, Ricardo made a decision. I'm going to the mansion. I'm going to confront her personally. Rodrigo started to protest, but Ricardo raised a hand. It's non-negotiable. She did this to my daughter while looking me in the eye and lying. I'm going to look her in the eye when I unmask this psychopath, Christina agreed. But we're going with you, and it will be recorded, legally, to be used as evidence. You confront her, she either confesses or ties herself in knots, and we use it all in the prosecution. Marcelo already had a court order for an authorized wire. Technically, it was Ricardo's residence too, so they were legally covered. Ricardo kissed Helena's forehead. She murmured "Daddy" in her sleep, breaking his heart all over again, and left with the trio of lawyers and Rodrigo for the final confrontation. The mansion was lit up when they arrived at 9 p.m. Daniela opened the door smiling, wearing an elegant dress, expensive perfume. Love, finally, She stopped when she saw Rodrigo and the lawyers. Something flickered in her eyes, a quick calculation, a recognition of a threat. What's going on? Ricardo walked in, closing the door behind the group. His voice was calm, but it had an icy quality Daniela had never heard. Where is Helena, Daniela? She blinked, feigning confusion. What do you mean? She's in Switzerland, love, on the exchange program. You know that. Ricardo took a step toward her. Try again. Where is Helena? Daniela laughed nervously. Ricardo, are you okay? Was the trip stressful? You're confused. I found her. The shout echoed through the entire house. I found our daughter, Daniela, or rather my daughter. I found her at a dump, barefoot, hungry, traumatized, after 5 weeks of living on the street. Daniela's mask fell for a second. Pure panic flashed across her eyes. But she recovered quickly, trying a new strategy. What? That's impossible. She was at the school, I swear. Something must have happened. I didn't know. Christina interjected coldly. Daniela Carvalho, you have the right to remain silent. I advise you to use that right because anything you say can and will be used against you. Daniela turned to Christina, then to Ricardo, realizing the gravity of the situation. Ricardo, love, I didn't do anything. You have to believe me. Ricardo laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Believe you? I did believe you. That was my mistake. But it's over. We have GPS tracking showing you taking Helena to the outskirts. We have proof the school doesn't exist. We have the absence of any record of her leaving the country. We have the forged messages. We have everything, Daniela. Her face changed again. Panic gave way to something cold, calculated. You can't prove anything. Marcelo smiled. We already have, and there's more. We investigated you. We found Marcelo Augusto, your lover, the father of the baby you're carrying. Ricardo went pale. You're pregnant? With another man's child? Daniela didn't answer, but her expression confirmed everything. Rodrigo continued. We found the conversations between you two, the detailed planning, eliminate Helena, get the inheritance, eventually disappear with the money. Every word was another brick laid upon Daniela. She realized it was over. She took a step back, calculating an escape. You people don't understand. She doesn't belong in this world, the daughter of some classless teacher. Ricardo deserves better. I deserve better. My son deserves this fortune. Ricardo lunged forward so quickly that Rodrigo had to hold him back. You abandoned a 7-year-old child to die. My daughter! How do you sleep at night? Daniela laughed, a hysterical sound. She didn't die, did she? She survived, probably even learned something useful about resilience. Ricardo broke free from Rodrigo and stood inches from her face, his voice low and lethal. You are going to prison. I will use every contact, every lawyer, every resource to make sure you stay there for as long as possible. Aggravated child abandonment is 8 years. I will get you 8 years, and Marcelo is going down with you. Daniela tried to run, but Cristina had already called the police. 3 minutes later, 2 officers walked in. Daniela was arrested on the spot for attempting to flee. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed, You'll regret this, Ricardo! I should be rich! I deserved it! Ricardo just watched as she was put in the police car, feeling nothing but emptiness. The revenge brought no satisfaction, only the need to get back to Helena, which was exactly what he did. 6 months after the day that changed everything, Ricardo Valente was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by colored pencils, paper, and laughter. Helena, now a full 8 years old, was drawing beside him, her tongue sticking out in concentration, a gesture she had inherited from Clara that made Ricardo's heart ache with a mix of longing and gratitude. She was drawing their family, herself, her father, and the 4 children who were now officially part of their lives. Joanna, Miguel, Pedro, and Ana had been temporarily taken in by Ricardo while adoption processes were underway, and he had ensured that each found a loving family, with full financial support from the Clara Valente Institute, an organization he had founded 3 months earlier. The house had life again, it had laughter, it had presence. And Ricardo, for the first time in years, was truly present. Daniela Carvalho's trial had been swift and devastating for her. The evidence was irrefutable. GPS tracking showing her abandoning Helena on the city outskirts, messages with Marcelo Augusto detailing the plan, forged records, edited audio clips, the fake school website. Cristina Almeida built an airtight case. Daniela was sentenced to 8 years in prison for aggravated child abandonment, fraud, and attempted misappropriation of inheritance. Marcelo received 6 years as an accomplice. The story leaked to the media and went viral. Sensational headlines dominated the news for weeks. Cruel stepmother abandons 7-year-old stepdaughter at dump, while father closes billion-dollar merger. Billionaire CEO finds daughter living on the street, 15 kilometers from home. Greed and betrayal, the macabre plan to eliminate an heiress. Ricardo faced every interview, every tough question, with a brutal humility that surprised both the media and the public. Yes, I failed as a father, he said in an interview with the country's top-rated Sunday program, his voice firm, but his eyes welling with tears. I was so obsessed with professional success, with building an empire, with closing deals, that I completely outsourced my fatherhood. I trusted blindly without verifying. I signed documents without reading them. I prioritized meetings over real conversations with my daughter. Daniela is a criminal and will pay for her crimes, but I also bear responsibility. I enabled her every step of the way by being an emotionally absent father. The raw honesty touched millions. Fathers across the country saw themselves in him. The constant struggle between professional demands and family presence, the silent guilt, the fear of failing. Ricardo became an unintentional symbol of paternal redemption, and the messages he received daily ranged from moving support to confessions from other fathers struggling with the same issues. But the biggest lesson didn't come from the public or the media. It came from Helena. 2 weeks after being rescued, when she was finally able to verbalize the trauma, she said something Ricardo would never forget. They were in a family therapy session. Ricardo had insisted on participating, not just observing. And the psychologist asked Helena what she had missed most during her 5 weeks on the street. Ricardo expected her to say food, or a warm bed, or safety. But Helena looked directly at him with those brown eyes full of pain and a wisdom impossible for a 7-year-old. I miss Daddy listening to me, not the rich daddy. The daddy who used to play with me before Mommy was gone. The daddy who read stories and made funny voices. The daddy who saw me, not just worked. The words were a punch to the gut. Ricardo cried openly in that session and made a decision that shocked the corporate world. He resigned as CEO of Valente Holdings. The announcement caused an earthquake in the financial market. Ricardo Valente resigns as CEO of billion-dollar empire to dedicate himself to his daughter, dominated business headlines. Valente Holdings stock fell 12% on the first day. It recovered after Rodrigo took over and proved equally competent. Worried investors called. The board tried to convince him to reconsider, but Ricardo was adamant. I built a successful company, but almost lost my daughter in the process. I have money, time with her I can't buy back. Rodrigo is more than capable. I'm going to be a full-time father. He established a trust for Helena, ensuring she would never have to worry financially, but removed himself from day-to-day management. He kept a position on the board with monthly, not weekly meetings, but 90% of his time was now dedicated to Helena, therapy, and the institute he founded. The Clara Valente Institute was born from pain, transformed into purpose. Ricardo invested an initial 50 million reais with a commitment to annual contributions to create an organization focused on protecting abandoned or vulnerable children. Paula, the loyal housekeeper Daniela had fired, was hired as executive director. No one knew Clara's values and what she would have stood for better. The institute offered temporary shelter, psychological support, education, and most importantly, preventative investigation into suspected cases of abuse or neglect in high-net-worth families. Predators like Daniela exploit the dynamics of power and trust, Ricardo explained at the launch. We will train social workers, create a verification protocol, and educate parents on the warning signs. No child should go through what Helena went through. The Institute saved 47 children in its first semester, including 3 similar cases of step-parents trying to eliminate stepchildren for an inheritance. Joanna, Miguel, Pedro, and Ana, the 4 children who had welcomed and protected Helena, were given a future they could never have dreamed of. Joanna was adopted by a couple of university professors who recognized her natural leadership and sharp intelligence. She was now attending a private school on a full scholarship paid for by the Institute, dreaming of becoming a lawyer to defend kids like me. Miguel found a home with a family of musicians and discovered a talent for the guitar. At 9, he was already playing at Institute events. Pedro was taken in by a couple of engineers and showed an incredible aptitude for math. Anna, the youngest, was adopted by a widowed educator who had always wanted a daughter. They were inseparable. Ricardo maintained close contact with all the families, visited regularly, and ensured the children and Helena remained friends. "You saved my daughter when I failed her," he told them at a monthly dinner he organized. "I am eternally grateful, and you will always have a family here." Helena's recovery was slow but steady. The first 3 months were the hardest. She had recurring nightmares, severe separation anxiety. She couldn't be away from Ricardo for more than an hour without panicking, and moments of regression where she believed he would abandon her again. But intensive therapy, her father's constant presence, a structured routine with genuine affection and infinite patience worked miracles. Slowly, Helena began to smile again. She began to play again. She began to trust again. 6 months after the rescue, she finally managed to sleep through the night without a nightmare. Ricardo celebrated it as if it were the greatest victory of his life, because it was. No billion-dollar merger could compare to the moment Helena woke up one morning, came into his room, something she did every night to check that he was still there, and said, "Daddy, I dreamed that Mommy came back. She said she's proud of you and of me." The story's impact reached dimensions Ricardo never anticipated. Parents around the world began to re-evaluate their priorities. Presence over presence and CEO-at-home movements gained traction on social media. Companies started offering more flexible work policies for parents. Support groups for workaholic parents emerged. Ricardo was invited to speak at conferences, not about business, but about fatherhood and balance. In a TED Talk that reached 15 million views, he said, "I built an empire worth billions, but it nearly cost me everything that truly mattered. Do you want to know what my greatest achievement is? It's not Valenti Holdings. It's not the awards. It's not the magazine covers. It's my daughter calling me in the middle of the afternoon to show me a drawing she made, and me being available to look at it. It's her laughing at the dinner table because I told a stupid joke. It's her sleeping peacefully, knowing that Daddy is here. That is success. The rest is just noise." Helena painted a picture in the art therapy classes she attended. It was a simple but powerful image. A large hand holding a small hand, walking toward the sun. She gave it to Ricardo on Father's Day. "So you remember that we're together now, Daddy. I held your hand that day and I never let go, and you didn't let go of mine." Ricardo hung the painting in a gold frame in his home office. He now worked from home most days, where he could always see it. Beneath it, he placed a small plaque with a phrase Clara often said, "Love isn't what you give, it's what you're willing to lose for someone." Ricardo lost his CEO title. He lost his corporate routine. He lost the identity he had built for decades, but he got his daughter back. He gained presence. He gained a real purpose. The choice had never been so clear. On the last Friday of the 6th month after the rescue, something extraordinary happened. Paula called Ricardo. "We've found 23 additional cases similar to Helena's. Stepmothers, stepfathers, guardians, trying to eliminate children from inheritances, some in the early stages, some already in progress. Ricardo, this is bigger than we thought. This needs to be a national movement." Ricardo sat down with Helena that night and explained the situation in terms she could understand. "Honey, there are other children going through something similar to what you went through. Daddy can help them, but it will mean traveling sometimes, talking to governors, creating new laws. It will be important work, but I'll only do it if you're okay with it." Helena thought seriously, then asked, "Can I come with you on some of the trips?" Ricardo smiled. "Whenever you want." Helena nodded. "Then you have to help, Daddy. No child deserves to be alone and scared like I was. If we can help, we have to help. Mommy would say that." Ricardo hugged his daughter, his heart bursting with pride. Clara would have been deeply proud of the woman Helena was becoming, compassionate, resilient, empathetic. He sent a message to Paula. "We're expanding. National first, then international. Create the protocol, recruit experts, establish partnerships with governments. Unlimited budget. We're going to turn a tragedy into a movement. In the following weeks, the Clara Valente Institute announced an ambitious expansion. Offices in 12 Brazilian states, a partnership with the Public Prosecutor's Office, training for social workers, a hotline for anonymous tips, and lobbying for a stricter federal law against child abandonment. Helena participated in the launch video, telling part of her story, edited to protect traumatic details, and concluding with a line that went viral. If you're a child and you're scared, know that there are people who care. If you're an adult and you see a child in danger, don't ignore it. Be the person I needed in those days. The video reached 50 million views in 2 weeks. Donations exploded, from small amounts from ordinary people to million-dollar contributions from other business leaders touched by the story. The Institute saved 200 children in its first year. Legislation inspired by the case, informally called Helena's Law, was passed, increasing penalties for child abandonment and creating a mandatory verification protocol in cases of guardianship transfer. Ricardo testified before the Chamber of Deputies, with Helena sitting in the front row. When the vote concluded and the law was passed, the deputies gave a standing ovation. Helena ran to hug her father, and a photographer captured a moment that became the cover of magazines. A father and daughter embracing in the National Congress, transforming pain into systemic change. 2 years after the rescue, Ricardo and Helena visited the place where they had found each other. The dump had been cleaned up and transformed into a community park, part of the Institute's project to revitalize vulnerable areas. There was a playground, a community library, a support center for families. Helena looked around and said softly, "It's different, but I still remember every detail of that day." Ricardo knelt beside her. "Me too, honey. Every single day. It was the day I almost lost you, and the day I started to be a real father." Helena hugged him. "You were always my dad, Daddy. You just needed to remember." They stood there for a long time, in silence, processing everything that had changed. Then Helena took her father's hand and said, "Can we go home?" Ricardo smiled. "Let's go." They walked hand in hand back to the car, the setting sun casting long shadows, a father and daughter together, healed, present. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. Ricardo Valente lost his position, lost his routine, lost the identity he had built for decades, but he discovered something infinitely more valuable: time, presence, active love, not passive. Fatherhood is not a title, it's a verb. It requires daily action, conscious sacrifice, the repeated choice to be there. No amount of money can replace a father who listens. No professional success can compensate for emotional absence. And when you discover that, truly discover it, not just know it intellectually, there isn't a second to waste. Helena had been right all along. She didn't need a rich daddy. She needed a present daddy. And now, finally, she had one. Every day, without fail, forever.